obviously lean on the people who have done it before you. So whatever it is that you choose to do in your life, whether it's be a garbage collector, be a dentist, be a doctor, be an officer, lean on the people that have come before you and get solid advice on how you can be the next so-and-so, because these are clearly people that are successful and have made it. So they clearly have a path to getting to that point where you are trying to go. I would say for legacy purposes, whatever your passion is, go to the people in that field and lean on them and for guidance and understanding and education.
Welcome to Be a Baller, where we're building a lifelong legacy for our families, communities, and the world. Your host, Coach Tim Brown, is excited for you to join him on this journey. On each episode, we'll be talking about how to be intentional about building a lasting legacy. We'll be exploring what it means to leave a mark that goes beyond just our lives, but has a positive impact on those around us and even generations to come. So, if you're looking for inspiration, guidance, and practical tips on how to build a lasting legacy that makes a difference, then you're in the right place. So grab your earbuds, get comfortable, and let's dive in. It's time to be a baller.
Welcome to Be a Baller podcast, building a lifelong legacy. I'm your host, Coach Tim Brown, and today we're joined by a leader who's dedicated his life to service, ministry, and community. Sergeant James Fuqua began his career with the Columbus Division of Police in 2004 as part of the 108th recruiting class. Since then, he served in patrol, recruiting, the gang unit, and the community response team. Perhaps most importantly, he shaped the careers of 16 young officers as a field training officer, one of the most critical roles in law enforcement. Today, Sergeant Fuqua serves in the Office of the Chief as a spokesperson for the division, while also being a certified expert, instructor in community diversity and procedural justice, equipping recruits to serve with fairness, cultural awareness, and integrity. And he's a proud graduate of Columbus South High School class. I ain't going to say the class. You can say it if you want, but I'm not going to call the class out.
The year 1997.
All right, now. He's also a U.S. Army veteran and a man of faith, active in prison ministry. Sergeant Fuqua continues to live his legacy of service both inside and outside the badge. Welcome to the show, Sergeant.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is a blessing, and I know a lot of South High Bulldogs who are really, really proud of that South High School.
That's right. We're everywhere.
Yeah. You know, it's ironic. You grew up on the south side of Columbus and later returned to that same community in patrol for over 10 years. How did those roots growing up in the South End shape the way you approach service and leadership?
Well, that's a great question. And that kind of leads exactly into why I became a police officer. You know, growing up as a young teen in the early 1990s, historically, the South Side and police officers did not have a particularly healthy or cohesive relationship. There was a lot of perceived corruption by the community of the police department, specifically CPD. And with that mistrust, you know, I even witnessed with my own eyes uses of force by officers to some of my friends and family that clearly was unnecessary. So because of these things that I saw and the mistrust within the neighborhood culturally, not just myself, but many people, I was like, how can I truly make a difference? And we'll probably get into it a little bit later, but once I met a Columbus police officer and he looked like me and come from where I came from and had a very similar story, I absolutely knew that was the only way that I could go back and help the actual community that I grew up in.
We talk about a lot on the podcast how first off, you can't be what you can't see.
Absolutely.
And then we also talk about this MVP concept, which is my vision plan. Because when as a young man, you saw that and this whole full circle, it was your vision. And here it is, it come to pass. As you think about that South Side, talk about the village that raised you. Because we know back in the day, our village was real tight. Can you talk about the village that raised you on the South Side of Columbus?
Yeah, it's a very real thing. It wasn't just, you know, my mother, it was my grandmother, it was the neighbors, it was my next door neighbor who ended up being more of a fatherly figure to me since, you know, I didn't have my father growing up. So truly, the neighborhood really looked out for each other, and it wasn't just me. So all of my friends that lived in the neighborhood, all the parents and the uncles and even some other elders definitely made sure that they looked out for us.
Looking back at your journey from South High School to the Army, U.S. Army, thank you for your service, and joining the Columbus Division of Police, what moments stand out as turning points in building your legacy? What are some of those turning point moments?
Oh, that's a great question. So, pardon me. So, one thing that stuck out in particular is, again, it was another moment where I realized that I wanted to join law enforcement eventually. And there was a situation, I was 16 years old, and we had just gotten out of school early because there was a mechanical issue in the building. So they were forced to let us out around noon. Typically, we got out at 2:30. So my friend and I, we walked home, and we were sitting on the porch. This was a warm spring day, kind of towards the end of the school year, but it's basically noon. And we're just sitting on the porch, and we see the helicopter flying overhead, the police helicopter, which unfortunately was not uncommon to us in that neighborhood. So we didn't think anything of it. And as we continued to stand and watch, we saw the helicopter was getting lower and lower. And we were like, okay, that's highly unusual. Right. So the next thing you know, we hear sirens and cars coming closer. And essentially officers came from my backyard to the front, and they ordered us to the ground at gunpoint. And while they had us at gunpoint, they handcuffed us, they threw us in the back of separate cars, and they told us we were under arrest for a burglary that had just occurred. Now, mind you, we had just gotten out of school, and we absolutely didn't commit any burglaries. And they told us that we fit the description of the suspects who committed this burglary. So I thought for sure I'm going to jail because I'm young, I don't have rights, they're not going to listen to me. And thank God for a neighbor that I had. And just for context, in the neighborhood I grew up in, just on that one particular block, all the houses, we were all black. There was all African Americans, all black people. And there was one older white couple who had been there for like 60 years, and they were in their literal 80s. And they said those young men did not break into the house. We know it wasn't them. We've seen them sitting here this whole time. So if it was not for them being eyewitnesses, we would have both been in jail. I could have had a felony record, and who knows where I would be now. So that was one turning point. And then the second turning point was actually once I was in the Army and having so many close friends, and I was a young guy to the unit, and they just taught me great life lessons, just, how to take care of your money from a professional standpoint, how to interact and how to get a job post-military, because I knew I wasn't going to stay in 20 years. Right. So these were great mentors that are still friends and basically older brothers to this day.
Wow. You mentioned the word faith in that. Can you talk about your faith journey and your relationship with the Lord?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a journey for sure. At 46 years old, you think you have life figured out, especially from a faith-based perspective, and that's just not the case. Growing up, I always believed in Jesus and I believed in the love of Christ, but I wasn't following Scripture, and I wasn't following the Lord's voice like I should have been doing, and I made a lot of mistakes. And fortunately, because of Christ and his ability to give us that salvation and the things that we need to be successful in life, that later in life, it really wasn't until my early 40s when I became baptized again, born again, and truly a man of God in the way that I should be, not only leading my family, but more importantly, just running to him when things are great, running to him when things aren't great. But the point is, having that faith and having that background gives you clarity, especially in this job, that everybody is one mistake away or one sinful act from losing their life or going to jail or something bad happening to them. And that's why it was so important for me to get into prison ministry, because we're all humans. We're all children of God. And because of my faith and me understanding how important it is to lead that one sheep back home with the other 99, that's exactly why I do it.
All right, you're starting to preach now. You mentioned that prison ministry. How does that impact you? Here you are seeing persons out here, and then going in work with guys who are in prison. And how'd that come about? How'd that opportunity come about?
So I have to give credit to my wife because she had been wanting to do it for a while. And I'm like, yeah, you go ahead and have fun with that. I have no desire to do that. Right. And as we kept talking about it, I realized, I prayed on it and I just kept thinking about it. And, the Lord stirred it in my heart. No, you need to do this. This is an avenue that is not traveled very often from people. Unfortunately, a lot of people look at the prison population that's just lost and they have no desire to rehabilitate or bring faith back into their life. Mm-hmm. So I definitely have to credit her for nudging me that way and just staying prayerful about it. And, I've been in it for over a year and a half now, and it's been honestly one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done in my entire life. I was a little apprehensive at first, obviously being somewhat of a public figure. Right. I wasn't sure how people would receive me. And I got to tell you, our very first session we went in there, this is a true story. Guy sitting right next to me is someone I had arrested in my past years ago. Wow. And he had reoffended, unfortunately. But the point is, he didn't have an issue and he thought even more of me for being in there and doing that. So it's been a great experience.
Mm-hmm. As your role of a field training officer, you've trained 16 plus officers during one of the most pivotal times in their career. The question is, what principles do you focus on? Are you trying to instill in them?
Yeah, there's so many. It's great, right? So obviously, we never want them to stray away from their initial academy training that they receive for those 7 months while they're in there. So we want them to focus on that. And then as a field training officer, we just build blocks. And one of the most important things is obviously making yourself safe and the people around you safe. So tactically, how you speak to people, how you approach situations. But those are the main building blocks while you're being a field training officer. But most importantly, like I said, and if any of the people that I trained were in here right now, they would tell you that the number one thing I would always say, the most important tool is not on your belt and it's not your vest. It's right here. It's your mouth. Not only what you say, but how you say to people. And that is the most critical thing in this job.
Wow. You have such a wide experience in this field. You're also a certified expert instructor in community diversity and procedural justice. When we hear that word procedural justice, what does that really mean in practice? And how can you impact the trust between officers and the community?
Yeah, in practice, procedural justice means what are you doing as an officer when no one is looking, or when you think no one is looking, or when that body camera is not on? What are you doing to treat other human beings with dignity, decency, fairness, and most important, legally? So procedural justice is just a very fancy way of asking, are you doing the right thing at the right time at all times as an officer?
Wow. That's great. In your view, what does, as we talk about leadership, what does true leadership look like in policing today beyond the badge and rank?
That's a great question. So first, starting with beyond the rank, it doesn't matter if you're the chief of police or a recruit fresh out of the academy. I keep harping back on, there's nothing more important than how you treat people. And you are a civil servant. And it's one of those things we have to remember as officers. We are called. I do believe this is a calling. Whether you are faith-based or not, to do this job is a calling, and you have to be prepared to be that civil servant, because a lot of times you're meeting people on their worst day. They're only calling you because they have no other option and no other resource. So that is something that we have to take very serious, and that is something we can never underestimate.
Being a police officer, you also have other responsibilities as well. So how do you balance those professional responsibility for your personal calling to serve the community and in ministry? How do you balance those?
Work-life balance is probably the most difficult thing for officers to do, right? We are here in practice 40 hours plus a week, just like every other person that has a 9 to 5, essentially, depending on what shift you work. But that work-life balance, it's important. So, My wife and I have a rule. Once we walk through the threshold of our home, we don't discuss work. Now, there may be times where there's certain things that have to be discussed specific to work, but we leave that at the door because, my wife is an officer as well. So that work-life balance is super important. And when you are off, to have a hobby, have something to do. A lot of young officers have a pitfall where they this new job is such an amazing, shiny thing that even when they're off, they're still trying to do police work and they don't have any hobbies. Mm-hmm. And that kind of breeds hypervigilance, which means now you're always on edge and you're always thinking you have to be the police. Mm-hmm. And that's absolutely not a healthy way to live.
We talk a lot now about community policing. Mm-hmm. Can you take us behind the veil, behind the curtain? What does community policing look like, and what's the goal of community policing?
Well, first and foremost, it has to be boots on the ground. Okay. Community policing cannot be an officer in a patrol car just driving down the street and waving and occasionally talking to people from the car. Mm-hmm. You have to have boots on the ground. You have to get into the community, know who your business owners are, know who, Mrs. Johnson, who's lived on the block for 30 years and knows more than we would ever know about what's going on in the neighborhood. Know the faith-based community in your area. So know the pastors of churches that are in your neighborhoods that you work. Actually getting out and getting to know people and becoming active. Being a volunteer at a school, going to a homeless shelter on your precinct and volunteering on your time off or donating clothes. That's what true community policing is immersing yourself in that community and showing that you care and you're not just there to show up for a paycheck.
When you were on patrol in the South End of Columbus, what would you say were some of the best practices of that? What were some of those things that you saw? So maybe saw some other officers doing it.
Yeah, I think we all took pride in getting to know people. And, I'm not going to sit here and take credit and say that I was the reason, but I think there were several of us that grew up in that neighborhood at the time that I worked the precinct. So it was very important to us to show specifically young Black and brown boys and girls that the police are here to help. It's not always adversarial. We are truly a part of the community, and just trying to break down those barriers and those stereotypes that I once faced at their age was really our primary focus in doing that. But we also just took pride in, like I said, when we had quality of life issues like too much trash in certain areas, to get in touch with city resources to make sure those things were taken away, to when we had a huge gang problem, making sure that we addressed that issue and worked to eradicate those behaviors of those people and with the gang involvement. So it was an all hands on deck type of situation, but those are some of the things that come to my mind that we really focused on doing to make it a better community.
As we look at young people today, and you're out there, you see them all the time, mm-hmm. What would you say is, how can we as adults, how can we as a community really step in and encourage them, guide them, direct them in a different path? What is it that we can, what would you say to the community?
The number one thing as adults, we have to listen. We have to listen to these young people. We have a tendency from whatever generation, I'm Generation X, that our generation was the best, or back in my day, we did it this way or that way. And these young people now, they are whatever they are, right? We have to first listen, because the minute you stop learning and learning from no matter the age, then you stop growing. So you have to first listen to them to even understand where they are. You always hear that expression, meeting people where they are. Truly, to get to young people today, you have to first start by listening. And I was just as guilty as many other people. But once I learned how to listen to what they were saying, it helped me kind of navigate what the next steps were in order to help them, whether it was from an education standpoint, whether it's trying to find a job, or just mental health issues that they were going through in present time, just trying to figure out how I could help. So I would say the number one thing with young people today, we as the adults and as the elders of these young people, we have to listen to them.
You've seen the growth of Columbus, not just numerically, but diversity as well, with different nationalities in the city now. What would you say to the city to help with, bring people together, so to speak, from all these different nationalities, different races, different groups? What would you say to the city, how we can bring these together? Because they're here, and we're blessed by them. We're blessed by them being here. What would you say to
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that takes all of city leadership, whether it's the mayor, city council, or just people that are embedded in the fabric of our community. Like I said, faith-based leaders that are very prominent, having functions, and whether it's a block party or a cookout or things where people feel welcome to come in. I think any of that would be great to get that the community to come together. I mean, breaking bread goes back to the beginning of time. So anytime you have some food, right, maybe a little bit of music, people are there.
I'm there. That's good. So this is a legacy podcast. So you think about living a legacy, which is what you're doing. What does that phrase mean to you personally? What does that legacy word mean?
For me, like I said, that definitely has changed over the years, because before, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, legacy was about, okay, will I be remembered? And what will I be in the legacy of the people that are coming after me? And like I said, from a faith-based perspective, once you get a little deeper into the scripture, and like I said, it wasn't until my early 40s that I truly was understanding as a believer, not understanding scripture in the way I should have. Mm-hmm. Legacy is about building the kingdom. Amen. Making heaven full, right? That's, I go to Rock City Church, and, Pastor Chad, that is the slogan. We want to make heaven full. So whatever that looks like, that's what I want my legacy to be. I want to be able to say that I led people to Jesus. I kept people out of trouble, and whatever we got to do to make heaven full, that's what I'm here for.
Wow, that's powerful. Make heaven full. That's powerful. As we come around the corner, what advice would you give to the next generation, whether in law enforcement or in community service at large, about building a life that leaves that kind of legacy?
Obviously, lean on the people who have done it before you. So whatever it is that you choose to do in your life, whether it's be a garbage collector, be a dentist, be a doctor, be an officer, lean on the people that have come before you and get solid advice on how you can be the next so-and-so, because these are clearly people that are successful and have made it. So they clearly have a path to getting to that point where you are trying to go. I would say for legacy purposes, whatever your passion is, go to the people in that field and lean on them and for guidance and understanding and education.
This has been a powerful conversation, just learning your journey from the south side of Columbus to the Army and to being a spokesperson for the Columbus Police Department, and just hearing you share, hearing your heart. They couldn't have chosen a better person, to represent, to be that person out front. And the key word you talked about was not what you say, but how you say it.
Yes.
How you say it. And I watched you before you became a spokesperson. I just watched you and the way you handle people, and made them feel, because they already, like you said, could be the worst day of their life. We don't know what's going on, but it's just how you make them feel in whatever situation it is.
Absolutely.
And that's the key to this thing. So I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you for building this legacy based on service, sacrifice, and commitment to shaping others. We talked about those officers that you're training and whatnot, and that's fruit on your tree, and I'm sure those guys can count on you, or they're going to remember something that they can get in that situation. Oh, that's what Sarge meant.
Yes.
That's because you really don't know till you get in there.
Absolutely.
And then it clicks. Oh, that's what he meant. And then they have a blueprint on how to handle that in the right way in those situations. So I want to thank you for that. And, here at Beer Baller Podcast, this is what it's all about, learning from stories like yours so we can have an impact that outlives us. So thank you. I want to thank the audience for listening to today's episode, and I pray they're inspired to share with someone who's working on building their own legacy. Until next time, keep pushing, keep serving, and keep building a lifelong legacy. I appreciate you, sir. Thanks for
Yes,
stopping
sir.
by the studio
Appreciate you.
today.
Thank you.
Blessings. Blessings.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with family and friends. The Be a Baller podcast is available on all major podcast platforms. This podcast was created by Coach Tim Brown and recorded and edited by the video production class of Worthington Christian High School. Be sure to come back next week as we continue to discuss on how to build a lifelong legacy. Until then, don't forget to be a baller.